Hello, my friend. I hope you are well. Today, I would like to invite you to listen to a brief conversation between two friends, Tom and Brian. Tom asks, "Is there God?" Brian answers, "Of course." Tom asks another question, "If there is God, why is there so much suffering, disaster, war, injustice, and evil in the world? It is just absurd and illogical." Obviously, Brian is unprepared for this unexpected question. He doesn't know how to answer it. My friend, if you find this question important, I invite you to enter into a little discussion. But first of all, do you have any thought about this? There are two issues in this little conversation. First, does God really exist? Second, if God exists, why is there evil and suffering in the world? My friend, these two questions are as old as the hills. It seems that people have asked all along our human history these questions. There have been struggles, and with struggles are efforts to find answers. Let us now look at each issue and do some analysis. First, does God exist? As you know, in the human history of many generations, there has been much reasoning on this question. Some people wrote down their thoughts. Let's take the example of St. Thomas Aquinas, who was born and died in the 13th century, a famous theologian. Thomas used the philosophy of his time, especially that of the Greek philosopher and scientist named Aristotle, who was born and died in the 4th century BC. St. Thomas came up with 5 ways to prove the existence of God. Though his ways were the product of the 13th century, they continue to inspire the thinking of today on the issue. We can look for his famous work named Summa Theologiae, or Summary of Theology, to enjoy more helpful details. Since Thomas lived in a time which was different from ours and used many technical terms of scholastic philosophy to approach the question, people of our times may find it difficult to understand his reasoning. But let us give it a try anyway, my friend, by looking at his 5th way, which is very short. He writes, "The 5th way is taken from things being directed. We see that there are things that have no knowledge, like physical bodies, but which act for the sake of an end. This is clear in that they always, or for the most part, act in the same way and achieve what is best. This shows that they reach their end not by chance, but in virtue of some tendency. But things which have no knowledge do not have a tendency to an end, unless they are directed by something that does have knowledge and understanding. An example is an arrow directed by an archer. Therefore, there is some being with understanding which directs all things to their end, and this we say is God. Well, I hope you understood what he said. But don't worry, my friend. You can find many other works of many other authors along our history that try to prove the existence of God. Just walk in a good library or go online and search for a phrase like existence of God in many languages. You will find a lot of articles, a lot of information. Of course, there is quality information and there is also bad information online. But a more practical thing for us is, how do we approach this question? How do you approach this question? As for me, let me make the following simple suggestion. Instead of trying to prove that God exists, let us now try to prove that God does not exist. So we do the opposite way. With that in mind, let us now contemplate our vast and orderly universe that operates with a system of laws, very complicated and yet harmonious, in both macro and micro levels, from the giant structure of planets to the tiniest atoms that no one can see. Who created the universe and arranged everything in such a system of laws? Let us contemplate the beauty of many species in this universe. Who has worn them with magnificent features, with colors and shapes that no artist on earth can ever imitate? And there is an observation of a universal phenomenon that all the peoples on earth, whether they are European or Asian or African or American, from the very early days of their existence, seemed to long for a spiritual dimension in their life. All people seem to have a sense of a supreme being, a creator, and hence they have developed some form of worship and reverence toward that supreme being that they don't even know by name. There is something built in them, in their structure as human beings, that inspires them to have that longing, that deep longing. How can we explain this? Let's contemplate the heart of so many good people who choose to make sacrifices, even their own lives, for the well-being of others. As we know, all living creatures carry in them the survival instinct. But who can elevate their spirit of love, that they are willing to live for others without condition? And let's look at the human ability of thinking, analyzing, integrating, creating, building, discovering. Who has placed it in us, in each of us, so we can do great things? And let's listen to the majority of scientists who say that the more they do science, the more they believe that God exists. Why can they say so while the methods of experimental sciences cannot use equipment to measure or weigh God? Why did some people who had not believed in God at first come to firmly believe in Him after engaging in science studies? Let's look at your own life with numerous events, both great and small, especially the times of challenge, of difficulty, to see there has been someone who is always there beside you, who takes care of you, who guides you, who inspires you, who consoles you, who strengthens you, even when you are not aware of that. Someone there. And let's look at your heart and soul when you are in love. Who has put that capacity to love in you? Is your love just a mixture of an accidental elements? No. There's something wrong in this way of thinking. Let's also look at brave choices for goodness, holiness, and beauty made by you, by me, and many others, especially in inconvenient situations that will cause us loss and suffering, but we still make those choices. How can we explain this? And my friend, just ask yourself the following question. If there were no God in my life, would I be able to remain who I am as of today? Could I be that good? Could I be that happy? Etc., etc. There are many other questions we can ask. And my friend, to be honest, after using both objective and subjective realities to examine the issue, I myself cannot disprove the existence of God. This points to a basic principle, that is, to disprove something that exists is much more difficult than to prove something that exists. I repeat that basic principle. To disprove something that exists is much more difficult than to prove something that exists. Once it is impossible to prove that God does not exist, the next questions will be, if God exists, why is there evil in the world? God is the creator. Is it that God also created evil? If we say God did not create evil, then it seems that God is not powerful enough to control and eliminate it. If we say God is powerful enough, but evil still exists in the world, then it seems that God is not really good. My friend, how do you think about these questions? Actually, a common challenge to many people's thinking and believing is not so much about God, but about the world God created. They have problem with the world, not God. And we are going to discuss further the questions above. So my friend, please open the next clip with the title, Did God create evil? Thank you for listening.